is. My name is David Rogers. I'm running for the 142nd District Judge. I was born here in Midland, raised here, graduated from Midland High in '84, went to Texas A&M University. I was in the Corps of Cadets there, went to law school at St. Mary's, worked for the George Bush campaign, the Republican National Committee, came back and worked for a civil trial firm that moved for 10 years. My qualifications are, I've tried over 300 bench trials, which are civil in nature, a lot of divorces, and I'm board certified in criminal law. I've done over 135 jury trials. When you're a criminal lawyer and a criminal specialist, that means I have extended training, and I took basically another bar exam, so the state bar says I qualify as an expert. It's primarily a criminal court. It's about 80-20 is the way it runs, so that fits right within my specialty. I understand Midland, I understand criminal law, and that's why I want to be your judge.
Good afternoon, I'm Mary Baker, and I'm running for the 142nd District Court to serve you, because I am a conservative Republican who is experienced, who is principled, and who is honest. I worked for 4 years in one of the highest volume criminal trial courts in our nation, and that's our federal court here in Midland. I worked for Rob Janelle for 4 years. We handled 80-20 criminal cases. In fact, I worked on some cases that David had before that court, and I was helping Judge Janelle make those rulings. But after I got out of the civil trial experience and criminal experience in that federal court position, I came into private practice doing oil and gas and mineral law, and also business law. And that's the reason I'm running, because this is not an 80-20 court. When you look back at the numbers, as our district clerk's office will show, we've had a 60% increase in the number of civil cases filed in the last 8 years. There are more civil cases on our docket, and just because they're not going to a jury trial, as David said, there are bench trials, there are summary judgments. There are other things that our courts are doing to handle these cases. And our oil and gas and business economy deserves to have someone in there who's taking care of business for us so that we can have our economy running smoothly. Thank you very much.
My name is Wayne Frost. I'm also running for the 142nd District Court, and I don't know that I can steal much from either one of them. My qualifications are very unique. I spent a career in the Midland County District Attorney's Office as a felony prosecutor. I was there for over 15 years. I went out into private practice. My internship was with the United States Attorney's Office in the criminal section before I came to the District Attorney's Office. I've done probably 1,000 bench trials. I stopped counting jury trials, over 250 jury trials. And probably I stopped counting around 500 felony appeals that I've written over the years, appearing in the Supreme Court of Texas, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, the 7th Court of Appeals, the 11th Court of Appeals, the 8th Court of Appeals, and the 12th Court of Appeals. I've been in oral argument in those courts, the highest court in the state, for both civil and criminal matters. Right now, I'm also serving as a first lieutenant in the Texas State Guard. I'm a public servant. I appreciate your vote.
We'll follow up with 3 questions for the candidates. We'll go in alphabetical order. Ms. Baker, first question, what are your plans to move the old cases and current cases forward and get the docket's current cases within standards of judicial administration?
Excellent question. So, as I mentioned, I worked in the federal courts, and the federal government can criticize for a lot of things, but the court system is run very efficiently. So I have experience with understanding how the criminal and civil dockets work together. And Stuart's right, there is a backlog currently on some of our civil cases. That's one of the reasons that my law partners and the partners at my husband's firm at Cotton Bledsoe, they said, we need somebody in there who's going to take on these civil cases and get us some rulings. So my idea for that is to establish a review within the district judge's office and keep a list of all of the cases pending so that when they are pending for more than 6 months with no action, we as the court can ping the district clerk's office and take action and make sure that these attorneys and that we are doing fiscally responsible things with your tax dollars to keep these courts running efficiently. It is difficult, and I've been there and done it, to do the civil and the criminal at the same time. And I'm not saying the criminal is not important, it is. But we have to keep track of all of the cases, not just the criminal cases. So I plan to keep a very meticulous record of this so that if you, the public, ask what's going on and what are the numbers, we're going to have an answer for you. Thank you.
Mr. Frost.
Yes. Mary's right about that. We have to watch the docket, civil and criminal. Practicing before Judge Pickett, Judge Baskin, Judge Culp, Judge Janelle, Judge Ferguson, and Judge Bunton, we learned a lot. Stay on top of things. Watch the docket. Establish some civil weeks for jury trials, as well as some criminal weeks for jury trials. We have to alternate. Judge Culp was great at that. He'd been in private practice a number of years. He did a lot of personal injury work. He allowed the prosecutor's office to have some criminal weeks, but he also allowed the civil attorneys to also have their jury weeks as well. Bringing a case to the jury, a lot of cases settle on the steps of the courthouse. We have to push that. We have to stay on top of things, and we have to move those cases. There is a backlog, I agree. And I worked with Teresa Klingman. I've worked with Laura Nodolf. When I was in the district attorney's office, I saw a lot of things that go on. And the thing is this, when Teresa became district attorney, she took the good that Al Shorey had established and she improved on it. What didn't work, she invented something else that would work. I think when we take over from someone else that's leaving the office, we use the good, we eliminate what didn't work, we create what will work, and we move those cases and we stay on top of those cases. The citizens of Midland deserve that. You're taxpayers. You want the most bang for your buck, you need someone that can handle it. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
Sure. Let me talk about the civil trial docket first. In the 142nd, there's a little bit of a backlog. There's some cases that need rulings. But basically, the civil docket, a lot of times civil lawyers govern themselves because they're going through mediation and other types of processes to settle those cases. The majority of civil cases settle, but you need to have a way to keep those on the docket and on track. So what you do first is you set up a tickler system that sets out, here's a case that's filed, you have a certain number of days to answer the case. Once it's answered, you set up a series of status conferences. I know judges across the state that have monthly status conferences. That might be too much in Midland, but every few months you have a status conference. And if lawyers don't want to go to status conferences, what you do is you put them on a scheduling board. And that sets a discovery deadline, a summary judgment deadline, a settlement deadline, and a trial deadline. The criminal cases are more problematic because those are continuously coming in. And you have two problems. One, you have those that are out on bond, and you want to make sure they don't get lost. Second, you've got a jail problem, and you have to, and the sheriff's office is probably going to address this because there's a constant problem with jail overcrowding that you have to be aware of. The system pretty much works with a series of pre-trials, a plea deadline conference, and that seems to take care of a majority of cases. And what you need is you've got a trial team of prosecutors, and you set a trial date with a couple of different cases, 5, 6, 7, 8 cases on the docket. You have some of the major ones because sexual assaults, murders need to go first, but you have some backup ones that can go as well so you can move the docket. And I know that I will consistently move the docket. Thank you.
Mr. Frost, the next question is for you. What unique experience or capabilities would you bring to the 142nd District Court?
Yes, I touched on this a little while ago. I have both civil and criminal experience. I opened my own office in March of 2000. I've been in private practice handling everything from oil and gas, family law matters, wills and probate, business and corporate, criminal, family law. And when I was in the district attorney's office, I handled, because that's pretty much the nature of it, a lot of the felony work in that office. But the district attorney's office also handles civil cases. And I was assigned to one of the civil sections called asset forfeitures. And I handled a number of those things as well. So I believe that we need someone that understands how the system works. And having worked on both sides of the bar, so to speak, criminal and civil, I think that makes me uniquely qualified. I've handled every kind of case just about that comes in front of a district court. When you have something like that, when you have a past, when you have the history of it, I've been practicing law about 33 years. there's not too much I haven't seen. You have to understand how it works, and you have to understand beyond that how the appellate courts work, because no judge wants to have a situation of, well, I made a mistake here, and now I've got to, they're reversing me, I've got to start over. Having handled probably more appellate cases than any attorney in Midland, I think that also makes me uniquely qualified. When we add it all up, and I'm not, as Ronald Reagan once said, don't hold their youth against them, but with my age and my years' experience, I think that makes me uniquely qualified.
Mr. Rogers, same question. What unique experience or capabilities would you bring to the office?
Sure. Again, I've said it once, I'll say it again, I'm a board certified expert. And I grew up here in Midland. I'm the only candidate that's born here and raised here. I understand Midland, Texas. But again, I go to the court with an expertise. I don't need to learn the rules of evidence. I know them. So when there's an objection, I can rule on that immediately. When you have to talk about, in a criminal trial, a lesser included offense, I know what goes in the jury instructions. I know what doesn't. I don't need to read up on it or learn those. I know the rules of criminal procedure backwards and forwards because I use them every day. I know the rules of civil procedure because I use them in divorce court every day. And the rules of evidence are the same across the board. So I think with my experience, I bring the broadest breadth of criminal experience, being an expert who can step in day one and start trying major felony cases, and take care of the civil backlog and start trying civil cases immediately because the rules are basically the same.
Ms. Baker, same question.
Well, I would disagree with Mr. Rogers that the rules on civil and criminal cases are the same. Civil cases are handled very differently than criminal cases. And I think that when we start looking at that and we start talking about actual breadth of what a person has handled, I'm the person with the broadest experience. The person who handles this district court will be, by statute, they will handle criminal felony cases. That's correct. Again, I've handled criminal cases in the highest volume criminal court in the United States federal system for 4 years. But I've also handled civil cases. I learned how to write oil and gas title opinions. I have handled car wreck cases. I have handled downhole complex oil and gas cases. I have worked for some of our local independents and local major companies here on the things that are bet the company cases to them. When they have those issues come up, you need somebody with that expertise and knowledge who's going to be able to understand what they're talking about. And I'm glad that Mr. Rogers and Mr. Frost mentioned their divorce experience, because we have a divorce court in Midland. That's Judge Lindemuth. That's not what this trial court is going to be handling. We're handling contracts, we're handling labor and employment, we're handling oil and gas cases. By statute, we're handling trespass to try title and title disputes, which again, title experience from one of the preeminent practitioners in the field. So when you want to talk about what makes me unique and what makes me the most qualified person for this, it's not only those experiences, but it's the breadth of what I have handled. So on the criminal side, I can do it. I also am unique in that I have issued rulings. I have sat behind the bench before. I know what it's like. I know what it's like being in that moment making those rulings, and I have the capability to move Midland forward on both the criminal and the civil side of the docket and get the 11th Court of Appeals good rulings so they don't have to have a backlog on the appellate side coming out of our courts here. Thank you very much. I appreciate your vote.
Last question for the district judge candidates. We'll start with Mr. Rogers, go with Ms. Baker, and then Mr. Frost. What would you do differently than current administration?
Specific.
Give me something I can speak of.
First of all, I think Judge Gilles has been an excellent judge, and when I sat down and talked to the judges about running, he truly believes that he's performing a public service. So we should all take time to thank Judge Gilles for his rulings and for what he's done for this county. But I think differently from Judge Gilles, you need to run a different trial schedule. As a joke, and it's a joke among every lawyer that's in there, every week you have Judge Gilles time. And Judge Gilles runs a little on a different trial track. I think when you tell someone the hearing starts at 1:30, you start at 1:30. Judge Gilles to his credit, was meticulous about making a record on certain things that aren't always necessary to move the cases along. And he moved at a little slower speed. I think you can speed things up. I think you can speed pleas up and get lawyers in and out on a quicker pace. That's on the criminal side. On the civil side, I know Judge Gilles, and like I said, he personalized each case, as you should, and he agonized over each decision. Specifically, as a judge, I don't think you can personalize each case. I understand that civil lawyers want a ruling. They want a ruling quickly so they can move on. And I think what you do is if you have a summary judgment, you give them a ruling quickly. You give people trial schedules. You make sure the trains run and they run on time, and that's specifically what I would do differently.
Judge Gilles has been an excellent member of our community, and he has served us for over 20 years, over 25 years if I remember correctly. So I'm not going to criticize a guy who's been doing that job that long, who's been elected by all of the people in this room. But as a civil practitioner, there's some ideas I would have on how I would like to see those cases move forward. And David's hit on a very important point in getting rulings. As the judge, every case that comes before you is either dealing with someone's life, liberty, or property, civil or criminal. And those are things that matter to all of us. And so I do want to give attention to the people before the court. And I think it does need some personal attention because as the judge, somebody's coming to you with a major and important problem. But what I would like to do is I would like to have bench rulings, or at least tell the people at the hearing where I'm leaning. And I would ask for additional briefing. If there are other questions that I might have from even criminal cases, if there's something that doesn't seem like it's right, let's not beat a dead horse in open court. Let's just get the information briefed, move along, and keep this running efficiently. Because taxpayer dollars are spent every time the judge is on the bench. And I want to make sure we handle that efficiently and correctly. So my specific thing I would like to do and change would be letter rulings, particularly in civil cases. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I would like to keep a list and a docket inside the court chambers of the cases pending and keep on top of those cases to ensure that we are handling these cases in the most efficient manner and to make sure that if the attorneys are having problems, we can get them the rulings they need and the time that they need it. Again, I'm Mary Baker, and I would appreciate your vote.
Mr. Frost.
Yes, they're bragging about Judge Gilles enough, okay? He's great. So here's the thing. As I mentioned earlier, when Teresa Cleveland became district attorney and Laura Nodahl became district attorney, they took what worked. What didn't work, they quit using it. They improved on it. I think anytime you replace your predecessor, the status quo has to leave. You have to improve. If you don't want to improve, you don't need to be running for office. Now, if I'm elected, what I intend to do is take the criminal scheduling orders and make them different. First and second degree felonies need longer between first and final pretrials, for one thing. That'll help the prosecutors, I know, because I deal with the prosecutors every day. I was a prosecutor. For the civil, I think that they need scheduling orders also, and they also need to be submitting bench memorandums so that the judge can look at these things and walk into the courtroom and not hear the argument for the first time from the lawyers. He can get up to speed on that. Going to the appellate courts, I learned a lot. You walk in there and you don't recite your brief to them. They want to know, is there any new law that applies? We've already read your brief, counsel. Let's get to the point. Here are the questions we have. And I think with bench memorandums from the civil lawyers, so that the judge already knows what's going on, he can rule on a summary judgment. Summary judgment is very simple to rule on when there's no dispute of the material facts. And when the lawyers have submitted those memorandums, that's an easier job for the judge to do than hearing the lawyers for the first time. In the criminal cases, I think we're going to have some special settings for some of the more complicated cases. It's not like TV where DNA comes back in an hour. The prosecutors need time to get that DNA back, and it makes no sense, in my opinion, to press a case forward when it makes the lawyers file for continuances when they don't have all the right things back in. So we're going to have some special settings, and we'll create that. We'll also have special time set aside just for bench trial weeks. That way we can conclude some of the cases
Time,
and
Mr. Frost.
take up the backlog and reduce that. Thank you.
They're your district judge candidates.